When a young woman's in-laws mockingly hand her the keys to a rusted, broken-down van as her inheritance, they expect her to walk away in shame. But what she discovers inside the corroded metal shocks everyone, because the worthless van hides a golden secret that changes her entire destiny. Elena Martinez never thought she'd end up at war with her in-laws, but fate had a strange way of showing her who truly stood beside her. She had married into the Carmichael family 3 years earlier, and though her late husband Daniel had been her rock, his family had never truly welcomed her. To them, she was the outsider, the girl from the wrong side of town who had dared to marry into their wealthy, self-important clan. When Daniel passed away suddenly in a car accident, Elena was left reeling. Not only did she lose the love of her life, but she also had to face his family without his protection. They never offered her comfort. Instead, they saw her as a nuisance, an obstacle standing in the way of what they believed was rightfully theirs. The Carmichaels had wealth, power, and influence in their small town, and they made sure Elena knew she had none of it. At the reading of the will, Elena sat quietly in the mahogany-paneled office of Mr. Howard, the family attorney. The Carmichaels, Daniel's mother Margaret, his older brother Edward, and his sister Victoria, sat across the table with smug expressions. They had always looked down on Elena's modest upbringing, her career as a teacher, and even the way she dressed. Now, with Daniel gone, they expected her to fade away quietly. Mr. Howard cleared his throat and began reading Daniel's will. To my beloved wife, Elena, I leave our home and personal effects, along with the savings account in both our names. Elena felt a small measure of relief. At least she wouldn't be left completely destitute. But the smirk spreading across Margaret's and Edward's faces told her something was amiss. And lastly, Mr. Howard continued, I leave to Elena the van parked in the Carmichael family barn, which belonged to my late grandfather. There was silence for a moment before Victoria burst out laughing. The van? You mean that rust bucket? Oh, Daniel must have had quite the sense of humor. Edward snorted. That thing hasn't run in 30 years. You'll be lucky if it doesn't collapse into dust when you touch it. Margaret, with her icy tone, added, Well, Elena, at least you won't walk away empty-handed. That van is your inheritance. I'm sure it'll suit you. They all laughed, mocking her, belittling her. Elena clenched her fists under the table, her heart pounding with humiliation. She had loved Daniel with everything she had, and this family dared to treat his last wishes like a joke. When the papers were signed and the formalities completed, Elena was escorted to the barn where the so-called inheritance sat. The old van was indeed rusted, with flaking paint and vines growing around its wheels. Its headlights were shattered, and the doors hung unevenly on their hinges. Margaret crossed her arms. Well, there it is. Perhaps you can live in it now that you're all alone. The Carmichaels laughed again and walked away, leaving Elena standing before the van with tears burning in her eyes. But even through the sting of their cruelty, something about the vehicle caught her attention. The van wasn't just abandoned. It looked deliberately sealed. She noticed that the doors had heavy locks on them, far too new to belong to such a decrepit vehicle. Her curiosity sparked. Daniel had never mentioned this van before, yet he had chosen to leave it specifically to her. And Daniel had always been thoughtful, always intentional. Could this be more than just a cruel joke from his family? Elena wiped her tears, straightened her shoulders, and whispered, I'll find out, Daniel. Whatever you meant for me to see, I'll find it. That night, while the Carmichaels celebrated their supposed victory, Elena returned to the barn with a crowbar and a flashlight. She pried open the locks with determination, the metal groaning under her strength. Finally, the doors creaked open. Dust swirled in the air, and the stale scent of time long past filled her lungs. What she saw inside made her gasp. The van wasn't just a rusted relic. It was lined with panels of gold. Beneath the rust, beneath the corroded surface, the entire body had been plated with pure gold. Hidden compartments revealed stacks of gold bars, carefully stored away as though someone had prepared for a day like this. Elena stumbled backward, her flashlight shaking in her trembling hand. The van was not worthless, it was priceless. And now everything was about to change. Elena stood frozen in the dim barn, the beam of her flashlight quivering as it revealed more and more of the impossible treasure before her. Gold. Real gold. bars upon bars, stacked neatly inside compartments cleverly built into the walls of the van. For a moment, she thought she must be hallucinating, that her grief had finally driven her over the edge. But when she reached out and touched the metal, the weight and cold smoothness confirmed it. This wasn't a dream. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her ears. The Carmichaels had laughed in her face, mocking her inheritance, not realizing what Daniel had truly left behind. He had known. He had chosen her, and he had made sure they would never suspect the truth. Elena sank onto the dusty floor, tears welling in her eyes. "Daniel, you knew they'd try to take everything from me, didn't you?" she whispered. "You knew this would keep me safe." Her mind spun. Why had Daniel's grandfather hidden such a fortune in an old van? Why not deposit it in a bank or invest it openly? It didn't make sense, unless there was something more to the story. She carefully closed the doors again, snapping the lock back into place. The Carmichaels could never know, not yet. She needed time to understand what she had just inherited and how to protect it. The next morning, Elena returned to the house she had shared with Daniel, the house she had expected to lose once his family twisted the will against her. Now she looked at its cracked walls and aging roof differently. She could fix it. She could fix everything. But she also knew greed had a way of sniffing out secrets. Margaret, Edward, and Victoria were vultures. If they had the slightest hint that the van held anything of value, they would descend on her like wolves. Sure enough, 2 days later, Edward appeared at her doorstep. His expensive car gleamed in the driveway, a sharp contrast to Elena's modest sedan. He leaned against the door frame with that condescending smirk she had come to despise. "So," he drawled, "how's the van? Did you manage to drive it out of the barn, or did it fall apart as expected?" Elena forced a polite smile. "It's still in one piece, surprisingly. I haven't decided what to do with it yet." Edward's eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion crossing his face. "Well, if you want my advice, you should just scrap it. It's useless. But you know," he slipped his hands into his pockets, "I'd be willing to take it off your hands for a couple $100, just so you don't have to deal with the hassle." Elena's stomach twisted. He suspected something. Maybe not the truth, but something. She kept her voice steady. "Thank you, but no. Daniel left it to me. I'll keep it." For a moment, Edward's charming facade slipped, revealing the cold greed underneath. He forced a laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Suit yourself. Just don't come crying when it collapses in your yard." When he finally left, Elena exhaled shakily. The Carmichaels weren't done with her. She could feel it. That night, she returned to the barn to examine the van again. She needed to know everything before her enemies grew bolder. Armed with gloves and a notebook, she began carefully inspecting each hidden compartment. She counted 24 gold bars in total, each heavy enough that she struggled to lift them. But there was more. In a false floor beneath the driver's seat, she discovered a locked metal box. Unlike the other compartments, this one wasn't just hidden, it was bolted down. After prying it loose and forcing the latch open, she found not gold but documents, old letters, deeds, and photographs. One letter caught her eye immediately. It was written in Daniel's handwriting. "My dearest Elena, if you are reading this, then I am no longer with you. I left you the van not as a joke, but as protection. My grandfather, Samuel Carmichael, was not only a businessman, he was also a man who saw war coming before anyone else did. In the 1940s, he began converting his wealth into gold, hiding it where no one would think to look. He believed banks could fail, governments could collapse, but gold would endure. When he passed, the secret was passed down only to my father, and then to me. But I could never trust my family with it. They would destroy each other fighting over it. You, Elena, are different. You see beyond greed. You know the value of things that can't be measured in money. That is why I chose you to inherit it. Use it wisely, protect it, and know that this is my final gift to you, the means to live free of them, free of anyone's control. With all my love, forever yours, Daniel." Tears blurred Elena's vision as she clutched the letter to her chest. Daniel had trusted her. He had seen her strength, even when she doubted it herself. The weight of his faith settled on her shoulders like a mantle, but she also understood the danger. If the Carmichaels ever discovered the truth, they would stop at nothing to take it from her. Over the next week, Elena lived a double life. By day, she kept up appearances, attending small community events and answering polite inquiries with calm composure. By night, she returned to the barn, cataloging the gold, researching how to store or sell it discreetly, and studying the documents Daniel had left behind. One evening, while combing through the papers, she discovered something even more shocking. Deeds to several parcels of land around the town. Properties she hadn't even known the Carmichaels once owned. Her pulse quickened as she realized the scope of what she now possessed. This wasn't just gold. It was a hidden empire carefully concealed for decades, and Daniel had entrusted it all to her. But shadows loomed. Margaret showed up unannounced one afternoon, her sharp eyes scanning Elena's modest living room. "My dear," she said with false sweetness, "I've been thinking. It's not right for you to bear the burden of Daniel's inheritance all alone. Family should share these things. That van, for instance, it has sentimental value to us. Why don't you let us keep it in our barn? It belongs with the Carmichaels." Elena's blood ran cold. They knew something. She forced a calm smile. "I appreciate your concern, Margaret, but Daniel left it specifically to me. I wouldn't feel right going against his wishes." Margaret's expression hardened. "You may think you're clever, Elena, but you don't belong here. One way or another, that van will come back to us." For the first time, Elena didn't shrink under her glare. She met Margaret's eyes and said firmly, "No, it won't." Margaret's lips thinned, but she left without another word. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She knew the Carmichaels wouldn't stop. They were circling like predators, waiting for her to make a mistake. And if she didn't act soon, they might discover the van's secret for themselves. She made a decision. She would move the gold. Piece by piece, if necessary. She would take it out of the barn and store it somewhere safer. A trusted bank vault in another city, perhaps. Or hidden investments that no one could trace. As she lifted the first gold bar into her car trunk, she whispered to Daniel, "I won't let them take this from us. From me." But even as she drove into the night, her headlights cutting through the dark country roads, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Elena's hands tightened on the steering wheel as the back roads stretched endlessly into the night. The gold bar in her trunk seemed to weigh down the entire car, a reminder that every choice she made from this point forward mattered. Daniel had entrusted her with a legacy, but more than that, he had entrusted her with survival. And survival meant staying one step ahead of the people who wanted to destroy her. When she pulled into the outskirts of the neighboring city, Elena found a discreet 24-hour storage facility and rented a unit under an alias she had prepared earlier that week. She moved the bar into a locked safe, tucking it away behind rows of boxes to avoid suspicion. It was just the first of many trips she would have to make. Each bar represented risk, but also freedom. Still, the unease followed her. She had seen headlights behind her for longer than seemed normal. When she changed lanes, they changed. When she slowed, they slowed. Only when she pulled suddenly into a gas station did the car continue past. Her stomach tightened. The Carmichaels were watching her. Back home, Elena reinforced her doors, double-checked her locks, and sat at the kitchen table staring at Daniel's letter. She needed more than secrecy. She needed a strategy. The Carmichaels thrived on intimidation and manipulation. They expected her to break, to crumble under pressure. But if she could outsmart them, turn their arrogance against them, she could not only protect what was hers but expose them for the predators they were. The first opportunity came sooner than she expected. A week later, as she was cataloging another section of the van's compartments, she heard heavy footsteps outside the barn. She quickly shut the doors and stepped out into the open, just in time to see Edward striding up the path, Victoria close behind. "Well, well," Edward sneered. "Burning the midnight oil, are we?" Victoria's eyes glittered with malice. "You're hiding something, Elena. We know you are. Daniel's van wasn't just some rusty relic, was it? What's in there?" Elena kept her face neutral, though her heart thundered in her chest. "Nothing but rust and dust. You can check it yourself if you like. But if you break anything, I'll have you charged with trespassing," Edward smirked. "Brave words for someone with no power. Do you really think the police will take your side over ours? We run this town, Elena, remember that." Victoria added, "You should just hand it over now. Save yourself the trouble." Elena crossed her arms. "Daniel left it to me. End of discussion. Now leave." They glared at her, frustration simmering beneath their smugness, before finally retreating into the shadows. But their threat lingered in the air. They wouldn't stop. The attack came 3 nights later. Elena awoke to the sound of breaking glass. Her heart leapt as she scrambled out of bed, grabbing the baseball bat she kept by the nightstand. Voices echoed downstairs, Edward's deep growl, Margaret's shrill tone. "You checked the barn!" Edward barked. Her blood went cold. They were going after the van. Elena crept down the stairs, adrenaline sharpening her focus. Margaret was rifling through her living room drawers, tossing papers and photographs to the floor. Edward was already halfway out the back door, a flashlight in his hand. "Looking for something?" Elena said, her voice low but steady. Margaret spun around, her face twisted with disdain. "Don't play games, girl. You're hiding something that doesn't belong to you. Hand it over and we might let you keep your little house." Elena gripped the bat tighter. "You think Daniel would have chosen any of you for this?" "He knew what you are, leeches. That's why he left it to me." Margaret's eyes blazed. "Ungrateful wench. You married into this family and you'll leave with nothing but shame." Edward's voice echoed from the barn. "She locked it! Break it open!" Panic surged through Elena. She couldn't let them uncover the gold, not yet. She darted into the kitchen, snatched her phone, and dialed the sheriff's office. "Break in Carmichael Estate," she whispered. "Send deputies now." Within minutes, sirens pierced the night. Margaret froze, eyes widening as red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Edward stormed back in, fury etched across his face. "You called the cops?" he spat. Elena lifted her chin. "Of course I did. You broke into my home. You think you're untouchable, but you're not." The deputies stormed in, separating them before blows could be exchanged. Margaret shrieked about family rights. Edward threatened lawsuits, but Elena stood her ground. "Check the locks on my barn," she told the officers. They broke in. I want it on record. For the first time, the Carmichaels looked rattled. Their power had always kept them shielded, but Elena was shining a light on their corruption. The confrontation bought her time, but Elena knew she couldn't rely on law enforcement forever. The Carmichaels had influence, and sooner or later, they'd twist the narrative. She needed a decisive move. That's when she found the final piece of Daniel's puzzle. Hidden among the deeds and letters was a sealed envelope marked, "For the day they come for you." Inside was a notarized document signed by Daniel himself, transferring ownership of not only the van but the gold and land, deeds to Elena exclusively. Even more, it included a recording, Daniel speaking directly to the camera. "My family will try to strip you of everything," he said, his voice steady and resolute. "But this inheritance isn't theirs. It's yours. If they contest it, show this to the courts. Let the world see what they truly are." Elena wept as she watched, her grief and resolve colliding into something fierce. Daniel had prepared for this, right down to their attacks. She wasn't just protecting gold, she was honoring his foresight. The next week, she set her plan into motion. She arranged a meeting at the town courthouse, under the guise of negotiating with the Carmichaels to avoid further misunderstandings. Edward, Margaret, and Victoria arrived dressed in smug confidence, certain they were about to strong-arm her into surrender. "You've finally come to your senses," Edward said, smirking. "Good. Now sign over the van and we'll forget your little stunt with the police." Elena smiled calmly. "Actually, I came to end this once and for all." She placed a laptop on the table and pressed play. Daniel's face filled the screen, his voice echoing through the chamber. As his words unfolded, the Carmichaels' expression shifted from irritation to horror. The notarized documents followed, laid neatly on the table, indisputable proof that Daniel had entrusted everything to her. Margaret sputtered. "This is manipulation, fraud!" Elena met her gaze coldly. "It's the truth. And if you try to contest it, I'll make this recording public. Everyone in town will see exactly who you are and what Daniel thought of you." For once, the Carmichaels had no retort. Their arrogance deflated under the weight of undeniable evidence. Elena leaned forward. "You've spent years feeding on greed, mocking me, underestimating me. But this ends today. The van, the gold, the land, it's mine. And you'll never touch it." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Victoria's hiss of frustration. They left soon after, their defeat bitter and absolute. Months passed. Elena sold a portion of the gold discreetly, using the money to restore her home, fund scholarships for her students, and invest in projects Daniel had always dreamed of starting. The rest remained hidden, her secret safety net against whatever storms the future might bring. The Carmichaels retreated into whispers, their influence diminished by their failure. The community began to see them differently, not as untouchable aristocrats, but as greedy parasites exposed by their own kin. Elena, meanwhile, grew into her role as steward of Daniel's legacy, stronger and more resilient than ever before. On the anniversary of Daniel's death, Elena stood by the van in the barn, running her hand along its rusted surface. To the world, it was still a worthless relic, but to her it was a monument to love, foresight, and triumph. She whispered softly, "I kept it safe, Daniel. Just like you asked. And I'll keep living the way you believed I could, free and unafraid." The golden secret within the rusted shell gleamed quietly in the dark, a reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden, where no one dares to look. Sometimes what looks like nothing on the surface hides a treasure beyond measure. This was Hidden Compass Stories.